When it comes to self-love, this is something a lot of people struggle with. But in comparison, I'm sure that most of us have got PhDs in self-criticism. So if you do find it difficult to give yourself love and kindness now and then, in this video, I'm going to share 7 self-love mindsets that have made me happier in life. So the first one is listening to my inner voice and my intuition. This has been a long process and it's taken me many years to start listening to myself more often. I used to listen far too much to the opinions of others and tended to do what they wanted me to do rather than what I actually wanted. And I'm not saying that we should discount other people's opinions, because other people may have opinions that are really helpful for us. But when listening to those opinions starts taking you away from what feels right to you, then you might end up living a life that's not true to who you are. And just because you might end up going down a path that other people don't think you should, or it's the path that's not very well trodden, that doesn't mean to say that your path is invalid. The next mindset shift is embracing my flaws. Often I've struggled with the belief that I'm not good enough. And I'm not saying that that doesn't still rear its ugly head now and then. But when I started embracing my flaws and acknowledging the things that I'm not so good at, it felt like the pressure started to fall away. I'm not perfect. I don't need to be. And what is perfection anyway? And now, of course, this isn't an excuse to behave badly or mistreat people and then just say, oh, well, it doesn't matter because that's just who I am. But if we beat ourselves up or we're overly self-critical when we make mistakes, we might get so caught up in guilt and shame that we can't think about ways of what we can do differently in the future. Whereas if we can acknowledge that, okay, I made a mistake and that's something for me to work on, from a psychological standpoint, that's a much better place to be, because then we open ourselves up to think about how we could be better to ourselves and to other people in the future. The next mindset shift was giving myself permission to do things just for the fun of it. In the past, I have strived to achieve qualifications in an attempt to feel good enough. And I'm not saying that I regret doing those qualifications, but that momentary feeling of good enough didn't last very long. In a matter of weeks, I was back to feeling like an imposter. I tended to do things with a definite goal of achievement rather than doing them for the pure pleasure of it. However, now I'm working on just doing things that I fancy doing and that I enjoy them. It's become far less about the end result and more about embracing the experience. The next mindset shift is being gentle with myself when I make mistakes. I am my own worst critic. I used to be really derogatory to myself whenever I made mistakes. But now when I make mistakes and I muck up, I'm more able to be kinder and compassionate to myself. And this isn't about letting myself off the hook, but what I do is, well, what would a good, empathic, understanding friend say to me in this situation? And then I'd apply that to how I talk to myself, because often it's far easier to take a step back and think about what a friend might say rather than trying to come up with those kind thoughts to ourselves. And interestingly, I've noticed that when I started to be kinder and more compassionate to myself, I've been able to be kinder and compassionate to other people when they've made mistakes. And if you're interested, I do talk a lot about my mindset and my thoughts around life in general over on my Patreon and my YouTube memberships. They're both the same. I upload the same videos to both, but I know that some people prefer one over the other. So if you want advanced access to my YouTube videos and also behind the scenes content, which I put out multiple times throughout the month, check out my YouTube memberships or Patreon, and you can find out a bit more about me outside of YouTube. The next mindset shift is learning to find my self-worth from within. I used to rely heavily on validation from other people in order to feel worthy. I used to seek their approval for doing things and even to get reassurance from them as to whether or not I was a good person. But no matter how much reassurance I sought and I got from them, I always reverted back to feeling like I wasn't good enough. But when I started to work on my own value and accept that I am worthy in and of myself, I stopped needing other people's approval or opinions to make me feel worthy. And believe me, this sort of thing doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of work, and I've been to quite a few therapists over the years to help me work on these things. The next mindset shift was allowing myself to feel. This was me learning to embrace my emotions and actually allow myself to feel them. For many years, I would chase feelings of happiness and excitement and do my very best to avoid sadness and anger and frustration. It can be really scary to sit with uncomfortable emotions. But when I started to do that, when I learned to sit with those difficult feelings, they weren't as scary as I thought they would be. When I could sit with those difficult emotions, I found that they no longer dictated how I lived my life. It enabled me to not get caught up in them and take a step back and make decisions and take actions from a more objective position. The next mindset shift was practicing gratitude. And this has involved me reframing my thinking and focusing on the things that I do have rather than focusing solely on the things that are missing from my life. And practicing gratitude isn't about ignoring the challenges and the difficult times or trying to be overly positive when we're going through a difficult time, because that to me is toxic positivity and that's not healthy either. But what I used to find was that when difficult things came up, I would focus solely on that thing and it made it bigger in my mind. Whereas when I also thought about how this thing fit within the bigger picture of my life, it didn't seem as significant, and really it wasn't as significant as my mind was making it out to be. So if you notice yourself focusing solely on the negative things or things that you feel are missing in life, it's not to say that you should dismiss those, but also try to think from a wider perspective. Take a step back and think about all the good things you've got in your life as well. So now that you have some self-love mindsets to work on being happier in life, check out my video on simple habits that will transform your life for the better. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.